It's a fight for a title against a fight for survival in tonight's all-important match in the finals of the PBA Philippine Cup. Game 5 between the TNT Tropang Giga and the Magnolia Hotshots. Pambansang Manok is on tap. That's at 6 in the evening inside the PBA semi-bubble in Pampanga. TNT with a commanding 3-1 lead here in this best-of-7 series after blowing out Magnolia yet again in Game 4 last Wednesday. Now that means the Tropang Giga can claim the All Filipino Championship with a victory tonight. But if the Hotshots win, they force a Game 6, which will tip off this Sunday. And now joining us for an all-out preview of Game 5 of the finals is basketball analyst Juan Banal. Juan, happy Friday. Good morning. Welcome back to the show. And who knows, this might be or might not be the last time we'll be talking about this series.
I mean, for my own vested interest, I hope this series extends so I can still see you next week. But we don't know. Anything can happen. But I don't know. Things aren't looking too bright for Magnolia.
Well, TNT claiming yet another blowout in Game 4 to go up 3-1 over Magnolia. That's why kung manalo sila mamaya, they are champs of the Philippine Cup. Maraming nagsasabi na wala na to, TNT na to. Mamaya tapos na yan, hindi nila papahabain. And now we know how tough it is to close out a series. We've talked about that before, and even players agree. But judging by the way TNT has been dominating Magnolia in this series, ikaw, Juan, yung totoo, alam kong we still want to talk to you next week, but sa tingin mo, tapos na to mamaya?
In all honesty, well, it depends on the mental state of the players. But it feels like, it was over before it even started. Because you aren't really solving a Mikey Williams problem. You're solving a Chot Reyes system problem. That's the tough part, right? I feel like Mikey Williams just perfectly fit. That's why Coach Chot Reyes in the TNT squad, the organization, chased after getting Mikey Williams. And that included, small pieces like Glenn Cobuntin, right? These are all pieces to the puzzle of the Chot Reyes system. And if you haven't figured out how to counter that TNT system by now, you might never do that in this series. But if Magnolia players willed it enough, tides might turn. And we were looking at the pattern. If it takes 2 games for Coach Chito Victorero to figure out how to adjust to TNT, then that means the series is over tonight.
Yeah.
But if we throw away Game 1 and say they just started flat, and let's not count Game 1, then that means the TNT and Magnolia might be in the same gridlock as the San Miguel series, wherein it was an alternating type of series. So if Game 2 belonged to TNT, Game 3 belonged to Magnolia, Game 4 belonged to TNT, Game 5 might belong to Magnolia. So it depends if it's a game-on-game changes and adjustments that are successfully done, or it takes 2 games for Coach Chito to adjust to Coach Chot. So it depends. But again, if you haven't figured out the TNT system by now, this series is over.
Well, it can either be one of the greatest comebacks if Magnolia somehow pulls even. Kumbaga, ma-3-2 nila, tas 3-3, tas mag-Game 7. Who knows? But let's go back to that Game 4. Balikan natin yung second quarter 1. Kung saan, essentially, nung second quarter talaga, that won the game for TNT. Because if you take that period out, if we take a look at the scoring by quarter here on our screens, right now, Magnolia pa sana yung panalo. They've tied in the first. They outscored the TNT in the third. Dikit nga nung fourth. But talagang kinain sila nung second quarter here, 33-15. Just by looking at this and taking a look at what happened there, how was TNT able to break away from Magnolia in that particular quarter and maintain basically their lead all throughout to seal the deal in Game 4?
Interestingly, for me, because I really spent time watching that second quarter, that seemed to be just right, like what you said, the X factor in that ball game, that 33-15 output. And when I was watching it, it wasn't even the offense of TNT that killed Magnolia in that quarter. It was the turnovers of Magnolia, the defense of TNT, just forcing turnovers. On my count, because I was trying to count and trying to look at it, and it was around 7 turnovers, and that's immediately 14 fast break points from TNT's end. It was just turnover after turnover, and that really hurt Magnolia's run in that game. And I think it was again lapses on the Magnolia end, and again TNT being at the right place at the right time, cutting through those passing lanes, making sure that they anticipate every single move of Magnolia in that second quarter, because the first quarter started out strong for both teams. They ended up tying up that first quarter. Remember, we talked about this, Andre, and we said that whoever starts strong
Yes.
has a greater chance of winning, but they ended up in a tiebreaker. And so TNT said, all right, let's forget about the first quarter. Let's pound them in the second quarter. Magnolia wasn't able to respond in that second quarter.
And they never looked back since then on. One of the big stories for TNT in that game, and I'm sure kahit ikaw medyo nagulat unless you have some inside sources, which I know you do. Troy Rosario, we were talking about him before that game. A 70% sensation in one leg, dislocated finger, but he played through the pain, taking the floor for TNT. And we thought, I personally thought he was done for the series. Dahil yun nga, dislocated, tas yung spinal shock. But lo and behold, Troy Rosario was there. He started the game, and he even contributed 5 points. He was 2 of 6 from the floor, grabbed 3 boards, played 19 minutes. That's a far cry from how long he usually plays. But what do you think of this situation with Troy Rosario and how this affects, of course, the morale of his teammates? Kasi for sure, inspiration to na, teka lang, lalaro si Troy? Are you serious? And then he did everything he could to help every time he was there on the floor.
I personally want to have what Troy is having in that bubble, because after that fall and everything, all of a sudden he comes back in Game 5 as if nothing happened. I want to have what he's having. I've got a lot of back pains, and and so Troy, kindly share your secret. There might be like a special drink there that you'd like to share to the world. But I was actually surprised that he was there. The whole build-up, the whole drama actually after that game, wherein the physicality of Magnolia was an issue, and Troy was the receiving end of really nasty fall, and then there was drama right after it, right? Like the drama prolonged and extended and leading up to the next game, and so we were kind of Troy must be done for the series. But then lo and behold, like you said, he's there, and so like again, Troy, whatever that is, kind of share the blessing a little bit. But I think on a more serious note, I think every player in the TNT lineup was essentially, again, chosen by Coach Shaw to serve a certain purpose, right? And Troy, just 19 minutes, right? But although he started the ball game, I think more than the stat line contribution that Troy gave, it's the psychological effect, not only for his teammates, but also for his opponent. Right, and you just try to indulge with me, like after giving it all that you've got, and being all physical, and then you see somebody keep standing up, that sends a strong message. And seeing Troy back in the lineup, and we know that he was sparingly used in that ball game. 19 minutes is not a Troy Rosario minute, type of ball game, but it's his presence, and it's sending a message to Magnolia that you gave us your best shot. You knocked us down, but here we are standing up. And psychologically, I think that's the bigger effect. That's the bigger impact of Troy Rosario back in that ball game. So more than for his teammates, it was more for the opponent that I felt like, that kind of hit a string.
Alam mo, Juan, tingin ko sikreto ni Troy doon, bata pa siya eh. And tayo, kailangan multivitamins, collagen, yan ang
Yung cool down stretching natin, mas mahaba pa dun sa nilalaro natin.
Nabanggit ko kanina, Juan, in TNT could have lost that game to Magnolia had it not been for that second quarter. That being said, ano yung mga nakikita mong adjustments? Like, if there are any, heading into Game 5 tonight to close out this series and finally end their long title drought?
I think complacency will be key. If they were a little bit complacent, too confident, saying that I think we have this in the bag, that might be detrimental, especially if Magnolia's backs are against the wall. You have to understand, in Game 3, they were literally caught off guard, right? But the style of play that Magnolia, they got sucked into the whole drama and the physicality. And then in game 4, they were able to adjust and expected that already. They probably were expecting that in game 2, and game 1 never came. Game 3 happened, and they got sucked into the whole drama, right? With the whole spitting incident and just intentional hurting and what have you. They got sucked in it, and they lost their focus. And they really played the game more of Magnolia that would like them to play. But then they adjusted and said, that's not going to happen again. And so game 4 happened. And then, TNT really made sure that won't affect them anymore. Now it's Coach Chito's turn to adjust, right? And so I believe for TNT to close this out in-game reading, because do expect that Magnolia will throw a curveball. They'll be throwing something that they haven't thrown for the entire series, because you have to do that. That's just what is expected of Coach Chito, because you've been trying the same thing, and this is the result, 3-1. So you have to do something different. And so from TNT's end, they can't anticipate what that is. Could be playing a zone, because we barely saw them play a zone the entire series. But you have to anticipate what this will be, but you can only guess. And so it's more of the in-game quick adjustment of the coaching staff of TNT that will play a crucial role to close this out, and how players will immediately adapt. As Coach Shot Reyes calls this on a fly, right? As he sees it, he calls it and makes the adjustments. That's the only way that they can close this out in a more dominant fashion. In convincing fashion.
Well, Juan, we still have a lot to talk about. We'll discuss more about Magnolia later on. But we have basketball analyst Juan Banal. He will still be with us after this short break, but we still have with us our basketball analyst Juan Banal, and Juan is giving us a preview of Game 5 of the PBA Philippine Cup Finals between the Magnolia Hotshots and the TNT Tropang Giga. Game 5 happens tonight. Let's talk about Magnolia right now. One, again, take out that second quarter in Game 4. Magnolia could have come close or could have even won that game kung di sila natambakan nga nung second quarter. What did Magnolia do right, though, in that Game 4 that they could carry over to Game 5?
Well, at this point, it's they cannot lose any quarter, I would say. You talked about taking out second quarter, but that is the X factor. That was the reason why they lost. You cannot lose any quarter at this juncture. The game is won in small battles, quarter by quarter. It's not even looking at the entire game. It's really looking at it quarter per quarter per quarter. And at this point, it's quite clear that we all already know what the strengths and what the weaknesses are of each team. It's very systematic, and you have to do something different and drastic. But the clincher here is that you're doing it and adjusting in a short amount of time. How can you go against your systematic flow to throw a curveball at the opposing team? It's too risky. But then if you're Magnolia, what else do you have to lose, right? And at this point, what's scary, if that's the mental state of Magnolia, is that they might not be playing with pressure. And that's a scary point, or that's a scary asset to have if you're Magnolia. And again, if you're TNT, you're playing against a team that is really swinging for the fences and has nothing to lose. Like a dog backed up, a wounded dog backed up against the wall. They're gonna claw and bite their way out. That's gonna be the kind of Magnolia that TNT will be facing tonight. And so how they respond to that will be crucial. But again, do expect that Coach Chito Victorero will do something different. And he has nothing to lose. It's risky, but he has nothing to lose. What else? If he doesn't do anything, they'll lose anyways, right? So might as well try something very drastic and risky.
Prior to Game 4-1, sabi mo, kailangan 2 out of the 3, the big 3 ng Magnolia, si Polly and Sangalang, Calvin Abueva, kailangan maganda yung laro nila in order for them to win. At least 2 of those 3. Kung silang tatlo, why not, diba? But if we take a look at the stats, all 3 of them fairly did pretty well last Wednesday. Calvin, who was awarded Best Player of the Conference before that game, had 28 points, 60% from the field, 80% from 3, 4 of 5. Ian Sangalang, double-double. Usual numbers from Ian, 17 points, 10 boards, 50% as well from the field. And may 3 steals pa nga eh. Paul Lee. Si Paul, expecting medyo mataas dito dapat. But, 15 points still, good, decent numbers, but not for Paul Lee. Pero anong kulang? If you take a look at these 3, 'Di ba? Parang, if you take a look, parang isipin mo, kaya na Magnolia manalo dapat nung game na to. If you just base it on these three's numbers.
Agree. If you looked at the stat sheet and looking at these three guys, you would assume panalo si Magnolia dun sa game na yon, right? But when we talked about this, Andre, we talked about at a minimum to position themselves, this must happen 2 out of 3 because and we're talking about a regular size team, but then again, we're talking about TNT, and they did play well. The big three of Magnolia, but they played well in quarters 1, 3, and 4. They missed out on 1 quarter, and that seemed to be the differentiator in that ball game. They have this big three will have to play well in all 4 quarters. Again, allowing the opponent to score 33 points and then just being limited to 15 points. If you look at how strong these three are, that means you're telling me that they only scored, assumingly, 5 points each in 1 quarter for Calvin Abueva, Paulie, and then because that's 15 points in 1 quarter, and let's divide it amongst the big three. That's 5 points each. That seems to be subpar performance, if that's the assumption. And so that means that's not what is expected of them. They have to play in all 4 quarters at a very high level. And then you also have to include the factor that this is a 7-game series. Yeah. At this point, when you reach game 5, I think it's beyond your main 5 or your main 4 or your main 3. It becomes now the talk of the town is who will be that magic bunot, right? For Magnolia. And I think that's going to be what's needed. Who will step up from the bench that will really be the curveball or will catch TNT off guard? And right now in the series, nobody has stepped up. We know that Gio Halalon did in the last game because his offense wasn't something that was expected, but did start out strong for Magnolia with a 7-point contribution in the first quarter alone. Mark Baroka is somebody that we expect already to contribute, but they need a magic bunot. The likes of Aris Junicio and these guys that will literally be somebody that TNT won't expect. And so that means, in other words, anybody from Magnolia should step up, and they shouldn't be solely depending on the big three. And well, you have to include Mark Baroka as well.
Well, we mentioned Calvin, the best player of the Philippine Cup, and it's his first BPC award since 2016, yung Commissioner's Cup. Alam mo naman natin, hindi kumpleto kapag walang drama, walang controversy. As we take a look at the breakdown, lamang si Calvin actually sa statistical points and sa votes mula sa media. Pero eto, pagdating sa votes din sa players, sa PBA committee, si Mikey Williams ang nangunguna dito. Your thoughts on as we take a look at yung stats, media players, PBA, and yung total points sa best player of the conference. Anong masasabi mo, Juan?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be controversial with my thoughts.
Go lang.
But media players and PBA, for me, they are very subjective. Of course, there are going to be preferences. And you're not just looking at black and whites, right? You're looking at relationships. You're looking at demeanor. There's just so many variables and factors that come into play when you're voting from a very subjective standpoint, right? Like who best represents the league, the kind of turnaround this player has made. I think that's what the media saw in Calvin after being suspended for almost a year, or over a year. Yeah. Then he turns his life around, right? And then he becomes this poster boy for Magnolia, right? But of course, that's different. You're talking about media who sees it from the outside, but internally, of course, you're talking about relationships. How does he actually really represent the entire league? If he wins, or how he carries himself as an athlete, as a player, inside and outside the court. And if he was the center of that controversy in Game 4 with all the drama that involved Poy Aram, then you already have a feel of the heartbeat of the rest of the players, why they voted for Mikey Williams and not like for Calvin Abueva. But then you have to also consider the fact that Mikey Williams is just a rookie, and being a rookie, he is very impressive. He seems to be that franchise player of TNT right now, the way he's carrying TNT on his shoulders. So players appreciate that, and players see that because they know what it feels and they empathize in actually being in a position of playing in the finals and going up against Ginebra in the quarters, San Miguel in the semifinals, and then Magnolia in the finals. players see those intangibles, those behind the scenes, the hard work that you put in. For a rookie to be this impressive, I would understand why the players are impressed and voted for him. So again, if you consider all these subjectivity, of course this is perception, and this is very just relationships are involved. That's why that. But if you look at the stat line, I understand. I mean, Calvin did his due diligence. You know, he worked it. And that's why, if we're just being objective, stat lines show that he did, perform well. That's why he deserves to be the best player.
He did put up monster numbers, and I like what you when you pointed out. Maganda, it's been a nice story here for Calvin Abueva. Juan, I know Game 5 tonight. This might be the last time we talk to you, at least for this conference. But Juan, before we let you go, I know you heard me. Let's put you back in the hot seat, and let's go back to our quiz question of the day, find out the answer. But first, the question I asked earlier was, the TNT franchise won its first ever PBA All Filipino title back in 2003. That was 18 years ago. Who was the head coach of that championship team? Juan, kung hindi mo alam to in 1 second, go.
No, I know Coach Shot Reyes. De joke lang. My dad. Coach Joel Banal, 2003, with TNT, with Jimmy Alapag being the rookie and Harvey Carey being the rookie and the franchise player. Was Asita Olava together with Vic Pablo, Mark Telan, Don Belbelano, Bong Ravena, Patrick Franz. I have to impress. I have to make up for it. It's my last time on the show for this stretch. So I kind of needed to impress.
Ilan taong ka nun, Juan?
We were still in college. I was, I think, third year college.
College ka na nun. High school pa
yeah,
lang
you were
ako
older.
nun.
You were older.
High school ako nun.
You were older than me. You're older by 1 year, so you're fourth year college, I'd be third year college.
The correct answer is Coach Joel Banal, of course, Juan's father. And Coach Joel led the TNT franchise to its first ever All-Filipino title by defeating the Coca-Cola Tigers in 6 games back in 2003. And yung coach ng Coca-Cola team na
ironically, was Coach Chot Reyes.
None other than TNT's current TNT head coach, si Coach Chot Reyes. And I remember that 2003, I think that was a year after Coach Joel led Ateneo to their first title in so many years.
So 2022 was Ateneo, and then he 2023 he coached TNT.
2002, 2003.
That's right.
Tamo 2022. Juan, thank you again. Happy weekend. Stay safe. And hopefully we talk to you again for sure. If not for this conference, for next conference. Thanks, Juan. Ingat ka.
Thank you. Happy weekend.
Happy weekend. That was our basketball analyst, Juan Banal.